what's happening in this room is I'm giving a presentation about creating a trusting and supportive workplace. I'm hoping to, in a funny way, follow up on what Shola was speaking of by providing some very practical activities, practices, ideas around how to make workplaces less mean, borrowing from his terminology. All right, well, I'll just go ahead and get started. So I'm Emiliana Simon Thomas. I'm the science director at the Greater Good Science Center here at UC Berkeley. And what the Greater Good Science Center does is track and write about and offer programs that are focused on the importance of our sense of connection, our tendency towards kindness, and our ability to contribute to something meaningful that is beyond our own self-interest, also known as our sense of belonging. So we track this research and we write about it in a way that is meant to foster opportunities in people's individual lives, in their organizations, and their relationships. So let's start with trust. And Shola spoke about trust and how important it is and how we as individuals might behave in a way, day in and day out, that might make us more trustworthy or make other people see us as worthy of their trust. And everything that he said is extraordinarily useful and valuable. But I wonder if anybody had any kind of pushback. Like, why should I do that work if nobody else is doing it? Because nobody else is as nice as I am, right? I can go through all this effort, and then I'm the meek person who gets exploited. Everybody takes advantage of me. I should stay tough and compete and take care of myself, and everybody else should be tough and take care of themselves. If that's kind of your narrative, you're not alone. It's a very prominent philosophical outlook on what it means to be human and why we're here. It's not the only one, but it's certainly one that's characteristic of our Western individualistic culture. We could think of Freud in many ways as being someone who sort of informed this perspective, right? Humans are made up of these three parts: ego, id, superego. The id is this wild, savage force that makes us want to hurt everyone else and consume as much pleasure as we possibly can, and our ego kind of comes on later and helps us be polite, and our superego sort of helps us decide whether to be polite or to be savage in day in and day out life. It's completely not consistent with evidence from psychology and neuroscience about how the human sort of consciousness works. So Freud was delightful in many regards for kind of opening up a literature and a field of inquiry, but his model isn't correct. It's not true. It's not true that human beings at their core are savage and self-interested. So are humans inherently selfish or pro-social? What do you think? Do you think when you look at another person, is your first assumption that they are a threat somehow to your status, to your productivity, to your welfare, right? Is that how we walk around the world? Or do we walk around the world thinking, oh, there's another person who is a human that I might rely on or turn to or seek kind of companionship or partnership with? If you look to the science, there is an emerging mountain of evidence that, in fact, the second quality is more essential to human beings than the first. In other words, there's no doubt that Darwin had an accurate claim in saying that survival was the driving force. But survival isn't, the route to survival is not arrived at through competition and hostility. The route to survival is arrived at through cooperation and communal, collective efforts. Think about great human achievements. There's never one person who did it, right? It's not one human who went off into their own building. It's not Batman. I kind of hate Batman for that reason, right? He gets $1 kajillion, his mansion and his butler, and he does everything by himself. It's kind of this myth, right, of heroism. But in fact, we're much more like Super Friends or Justice League than perhaps that narrative would like to say. So I'm going to just share with you some of the research and some of the findings. This is Felix Wernick and Michael Tomasello, who have been watching kids for years and years. And what they do is they bring them into the lab and they see what they do. Do they act self-interested? Do they ignore other people's need for help? What do they do? Without any prompting, without any reward or encouragement, what do they do? And here are 2 example videos.
Goes here, and this paper, here. You can! And this one can go right there. And this one here. Go. And
So she's got tons of other stuff going on. She's busy, yet without that person paying one shred of attention to her, in fact, actively speaking in a way that makes it impossible to get her attention, the child gets the object that is dropped and gives it back.
I'll put that one here. And then let's see, I've got this big one. This one's for the big box like this. I'll put that here. And then here's a small one. I'll put that here. Put that over there. And then here's another, let's see, these are the same size. Let's put that here. And put this one here.
Okay, so from this work, from watching young pre-verbal children for years and years, the interpretation, the claim is that actually young children come into the world extraordinarily pro-social. Pro-social means interested in the welfare of others, motivated to support and assist others when another is in need. So another group of scientists who study this basically have come up with a theory called the social baseline theory, which is not so important what it's called, but the claim is that actually human beings, well, I'll give you a little bit of story why they call it that. Social neuroscientists have been trying to understand what the brain does when people interact in a social context, and basically what they've tried is, well, let's put 2 people into the lab and measure their brains and have them do some kind of task that's cooperative, and let's have the person separately get scanned and see what happens in their brain when they're doing the task by themselves. And the question is, which brain areas come online or get activated in the social context that aren't active in the individual context? And time again, as people tried to do this study, there wasn't an increase in selective regions that was specific to a social demand as opposed to an individual demand. In fact, what happened was individually, people showed greater activation in regions that signal salience or vigilance or a concern about something that might be harmful or threatening or stressful to them. And so these guys went, wait a minute, it's not true that individual experience is the baseline. That's not how we operate. Social is the baseline, and in fact, it doesn't make sense to subtract the individual from the social in order to figure out which brain regions support social. We're expecting to be surrounded by other people all the time. Other people are what they call a bio-behavioral resource. We need other people in order to meet our life's necessities and goals. So again, being social is much more important and basic and fundamental to our survival than meeting our individual needs. Another field of research that supports this claim that we're fundamentally pro-social are studies that look at what happens in the brain when somebody is exposed to a painful stimulus. So for example, they might put a little electrode on someone's wrist and shock it and look at how their brain responds. And we know there's a pretty systematic pattern of response that represents both the physical sensation pain and the kind of emotional concern associated with pain, the distress that, oh, this pain is bothering me and I need to do something about it. It turns out if you put someone into the laboratory and you tell them they're playing an interactive game with people in another place where they're passing a ball around, I pass it to you, you pass it back, pass it to you, you pass it to her, or just kind of silly, simple. And at some point in the game, and I'm in the brain scanner, they're measuring my brain, some point in the game, it's controlled so that I no longer get passes. So the other two are passing to each other, and I'm kind of waiting there like, hey, what's up? Like, you guys aren't passing to me anymore, right? I'm being excluded, right? What happens in the brains of the people who get isolated, excluded in a game inside of a brain scanner as part of a research study? Their pain regions light up. It is painful for human beings to be ostracized and to be forced into isolation. And knowing that tells us a little bit about why we might believe or endorse the notion that being social is our, again, default state. It's our baseline mode. Another team that is actually a collaboration between economists, because economists really don't like the idea that generosity and kindness should enter into any rational decision-making, right? A rational decision, if you're asked, how are you going to spend money, should be that you do whatever is going to maximize your own benefit, your own gain, and that's kind of the rational and sensible thing to do. And in some regards, business models have kind of flown with that ethos. In fact, our brains don't work that way. Our brains aren't set up to maximize self-interest. They are set up to observe, notice other people, take that into consideration, and make decisions that are generous and cooperative. And this team of researchers has plotted out, and I'm not going to test you on all the regions and all the colors and areas, but the dark blue is the area or the system of brain structures that are always involved when people make generous and kind decisions. So the fact that our brains actually have systems that do this, that are sort of deep in the brain, they're not higher up where other kinds of knowledge get represented, like the specificities of a healthcare policy, right? They're way deep down in our brain, similar to the regions that help us breathe, sleep, and decide what to eat. Jamil Zaki is a researcher who I respect tremendously, and I love his quote up here, that basically we think often of kindness, as Shola might have defined it, as being kind of effortful and obligatory. And it takes a lot of work to be kind. In fact, when it comes to our brain, kindness activates our reward circuitry. It's something that really does feel good. Kids act that way. Shola told some compelling stories about his own youth and the kinds of realizations he had. He also told some compelling stories about experiences that might have made his inclination to be kind a little bit dimmer, right? Experiences that perhaps overlaid upon his impulse to be kind, and that's what we're talking about now. A different study looking at kindness and making an argument that kindness is sort of the innate impulse, the first thing we want to do, right? Because again, let's think back at Freud. Freud's saying, oh, what you want to do is be selfish and, surround and protect your stuff and hold on to it and make sure nobody else can get it. So these are also researchers who were interested in why people make various decisions. And the game that they asked young undergrads to do was, you get $10, and how are you going to split it? There's another person. You get to keep some, you get to give the other person some. You could keep 9 and give them 1. You could keep 7, give them 3. You could keep 2 and give them 8. They do get to refuse it. They could, out of dignity, say, I'm not going to take 1. If they refuse it, nobody gets anything, right? What they were interested in was not so much how much people give. People, on average, tend to give 4. Right? They tend to keep a little tiny bit more for themselves, be relatively egalitarian about it. But what they were interested in was, what's the difference between times when people make a decision about how much to give really quickly, and what they're calling really quickly is under 10 seconds, and times when people make that decision more slowly. So you take longer than 10 seconds to decide how much of that $10 you're going to give away. When you take longer to 10 seconds, you give away less, right? When you make a kind of impulsive decision, you're more generous. You give more. And so again, another piece of evidence to suggest that this impulse to be kind, to be cooperative, to trust is stronger and more basic than an alternative impulse to be self-interested. All right? Other researchers who have looked at brain activation have shown data that is consistent with this. When people are more selfish, they more strongly engage the structures in their brain that are involved in higher cognitive decision making. So they're thinking harder about what to do, and in that thinking harder about what to do, regrettably, they're thinking, maybe I can get away with taking a little more and giving them a little bit less. Right? So our impulse is to be kind, but our minds sometimes short-circuit that impulse. Laura Aknin and Elizabeth Dunn have looked at the relationship between generosity and national metrics of well-being all over the world. The color map here is showing you the relationship between generosity and metrics of well-being. So we're talking about education levels, infant mortality, literacy. And what you see is the greener it is, the stronger that relationship. And the important thing about this plot is that wherever you look, except perhaps for a few places where life is so difficult that people are afraid of their own safety for contextual reasons, people do better at national levels when they're more generous. Right? So if it's green, there's a positive correlation between how generous people are, what they call pro-social spending, how much they donate to various charitable causes or the schools that their children are learning in, etc. So around the world, wherever we look, when people are more generous, they're healthier, they're happier, they're doing better. One of the things I do as a science director at the Greater Good is teach a class. It's called The Science of Happiness. It's on the edX platform. It's a virtual class. It's free, and it's 10 weeks long, and I basically talk about all the ideas that I'm bringing up here in very succinct format in more detail and with more evidence and different study cases to review. After I make this case, as I have done in the past few minutes, to perhaps persuade you. I went to the persuasion thing a little bit earlier today. I don't know if I'm doing better than I would have done before I did that, but to perhaps persuade you to imagine that the workplace that you're in is filled with other people who are fundamentally pro-social and trustworthy. And if you walk in the door with that orientation and that assumption, you're going to have an easier time expressing your own kindness, right, as Shola would advocate. I also kind of go deeper into, well, what are the other physiological systems that we know are driving kindness? In brief, oxytocin, a neuropeptide in the brain, in the body, works in a lot of different ways. Perhaps the most familiar, it's involved in childbirth, it's involved in breastfeeding. Turns out it's also involved in other social pleasures. If you are touching another person who cares about you and you're supporting, you are releasing and they are releasing oxytocin, and you both report that as a pleasurable experience. Oxytocin is also instrumental to our intimate relational experiences. Oxytocin is associated with trust. Oxytocin is associated with recovering from pain and stress more rapidly. And oxytocin, again, is something we manufacture and utilize in social contexts when we experience trust and feelings of safety around others. So what can you do? Did I skip a slide? No. What could one do to kind of actualize their oxytocin, the reward circuits in your brain, the systems that are involved in empathy and perspective taking, I don't know, touch base to maximize your potential for kindness. I'm going to give you some ideas that are both personal, but I won't spend too much time there because I feel like that was the main focus of Shola's talk, was really about what can you do as a person walking out the door to find and discover your own kindness and bring that to the workplace. I'll go into that a little bit, but then there are also interpersonal dynamics, and then there's also a kind of cultural level. So we'll start with personal. At the Greater Good Science Center, we essentially survey all the different activities that have been shown by researchers to make us feel a greater sense of well-being in life, and largely through our potential to experience more kindness and social benevolence. And mindfulness is an important and Very impactful technique. Mindfulness doesn't mean you have to be somebody who wears crimson robes and sits in a cave for many years. It can be as simple as taking a deep breath when you're not sure what's happening and you're feeling anxious about it. A deep breath, breathing out a little bit more slowly than you breathe in. Turns out when you breathe out a little bit more slowly than you breathe in, you're activating something called the vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve is the primary influence of your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of your body that helps you recover from stress. It's the part of your body that helps you feel content and resilient. It helps you cope with difficult times. It also is involved in affiliation. When your vagus nerve is more active or more strongly influencing your physiology, you are somebody who is more attuned to people around you and to the social context. So mindfulness is a way to really sort of drop into your pro-sociality, right? You calm your own nervous system, which makes you available as an empathic person to others. And again, that's echoing what Shola was saying about some of the ideas you had about self-compassion, about being kind to yourself. So authenticity and candidness. Certainly, building trust means that people need to know where you're coming from and who you are and what your status is, right? What your feelings are. And again, Shola talked about this, how valuable it is to really just come out and say what it is that's going on, rather than try to manipulate or speak in a way that feels like it aligns with expectations. Loving kindness and gratitude. So loving kindness, again, feels kind of soft and wishy-washy, but actually it's not too different, and practically it is the name of a kind of contemplative practice. It's not just an idea, but rather it's a practice, and we'll actually spend a little bit of time trying that during this time together. And gratitude, there's this like robust science that shows that when people are more grateful, and sometimes we're lucky, right? We just happen to be more grateful as who we are. Perhaps it's because of how our parents were. If we had Shola's parents, we'd all be as grateful as possible. Or perhaps it's because of some other sort of genetic predilection. Regardless, if you're more grateful, you tend to be happier. You tend to be more resilient to stress. If you're more grateful and you have the misfortune of encountering a deeply traumatic experience, you're less likely to suffer from post-traumatic stress. So that's the if you're more grateful. And to provide a little hope to people who think, gosh, maybe I'm not that grateful, you can actually get more grateful by practicing gratitude. And practicing gratitude, and the studies have done things like getting people to keep a journal, just writing down every night 3 things that you're grateful for, or writing a letter to someone, thinking about someone in your life who had this powerful impact on you, and writing them a long, 2-page, really descriptive letter about how what they did changed your life for the better, and how much you appreciate the effort and that they put into that, has powerful effects on well-being, on the satisfaction in relationships. So when couples thank each other for the mundane things that we inevitably begin to take for granted, it leads to greater satisfaction and longevity in relationships. So for our first exercise, I'd love for you to turn to somebody who's sitting near you, and remember, trying to decide whether to give you something to thank them for or let you think of something spontaneously to thank them for. If you would like to think of something spontaneous that happened to you earlier, it doesn't have to be really them you're practicing. That would probably be more authentic. But if you want to just try it in order to get the experience, imagine that person paid for your coffee at the coffee shop and you were in line behind them. Okay? And this is just an exercise of practicing. What we know about gratitude is that people think it's wildly important. Everybody in here thought gratitude is a good thing. I never say, hey, what do you guys think of gratitude? Who likes it? Who doesn't? And see a lot of people say, I don't like it. Everybody thinks it's really important. And then everybody thinks they're really good at it. I'm super grateful, and actually I'm more grateful today than I was 10 years ago. What about other people? Everybody thinks that other people are less grateful. So if you think about that mathematically, and you don't have to be genius for this, it's impossible. It can't be that all of us are getting higher but then everybody else is getting lower because everybody else is one of us at some point. It's not mathematically possible. So what it means is that we're out of practice. We're not good at expressing it anymore. I may feel it all day long, but if I'm not saying it, nobody else sees that in me and they don't think I'm grateful, right? So saying it can be a very powerful way to reintroduce that value, that basic sentiment into your life and in particular into the workplace. So turn to your person. When you say thank you for what they did, thank you for the effort that they put into it, and here's why it really made a difference in my day. Yeah, great. So I'll give you guys 3 minutes to do that. So turn and switch off, switch back and forth. Just try it. That was an exercise that didn't take very long, and a practice that doesn't take very long, and doesn't take a lot of effort, makes you and the other person feel really great. One gratitude researcher, Sarah Algo, who studies its impact on relationships, calls gratitude the find, remind, and bind emotion, indicating that as an evolved human experience, the function of gratitude is to help us form long-term interdependent bonds with conspecifics. We thank people who do things that make a contribution to our lives that helps us remember them remember us, and creates a sense of closeness and connection. So if you're thinking about how to build more trust in your workplace, it's really easy just to take maybe, 15, 20 seconds to thoroughly thank the people for the various things that they do that contribute to the goodness in your life. Another sort of fun domain of science, and I love that there was so many raffle prizes that were about warriors swag. Because one of the interesting research projects that looked at the power of touch in contributing to social relationships and cooperative endeavors involved basketball. My colleague Dacher Keltner and one of his grad students, Michael Kraus, so this is going to sound like work, right? They spent hours and hours carefully coding basketball games, right? So watching carefully frame after frame, and what they were writing down was how often the players touched each other. Were they fist bumping? Were they high five slapping? Were they shoulder checking? Were they chest bumping? What were they doing? How frequently were they doing it? And what they found was the more a team did that, the more the players did that, the more games they won. Okay, the more successful they were as a team. Now that you know that, it's kind of fun to watch basketball and notice which teams tend to be more tactile and which don't. In another more subdued study, some French researchers had a classroom environment, and they had the teacher walk around the room and casually touch on the shoulders different students as they walked through the room. And then, slightly later, invite someone to come up and do their homework on the board, right? Come up and show us how you solve this problem. And the students who had been touched were 50% more likely to come up and to share their work. So there's something about appropriate interpersonal touch, and for appropriate, it's pretty much got to be between the shoulders and the elbows for people you don't know. It's not that hard, right? It's not that hard. It's easy. People don't typically feel threatened by that. And we're all pretty good at knowing when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate to touch others. So provided that you can have some confidence in your ability to understand that, we have to be careful across cultural barriers, right? Sometimes it's appropriate to ask. So, will it bother you if I touched you, and make sure they, understand that you don't mean anything inappropriate by it. If touch is part of your interaction, then you tend to build a sense of trust. Active listening, this came up earlier today also, so I'll just flesh out a little bit what active listening means. Active listening means not trying to plan what you're going to say while you're hearing somebody talk to you, really just letting their words be the most important focus of the moment, not interrupting, not offering a solution, simply asking a question and listening and being present. Active listening is a really powerful way to fuel trust when another person is having a conversation or connecting with you. And then finally, one of the biggest issues in workplaces is how we deal with conflict. And you might imagine that somebody who studies happiness would say, well, just figure out a way to never have conflict. I wish I had that answer. There isn't such a possibility. Conflict is always going to happen in workplaces. We have to have conflict. Why? Because it's how we transcend the status quo, right? Somebody's always going to want things to be how they are, and somebody else is always going to think there's a way that things could be different, that could be better, and may or may not. But that's a conflict. People have different ideas, and how do we handle conflict? Can we use that as an opportunity to grow, to realize something new, if we don't actually focus on it or teach people in our community techniques for reconciling conflict, then it's unlikely, right? More often than not, and Shola kind of mentioned this also, there's that person, right? There's that person who you don't like in your office. There's that person who, when they walk in, you're kind of exasperated and a little bit depressed when they're there. So what is that doing for you, them, and the culture of your workplace? It's kind of infusing it with a little bit of mistrust, right? It becomes sort of slightly toxic. So is it possible that in your workplace there could be some explicit direction around how to apologize and how to forgive? When researchers study apologies in workplaces and they look at how employees feel about leaders who apologize versus leaders who don't, you guessed it. When leaders apologize, employees have so much more respect for them, right? Employees feel so much more connected and a greater sense of loyalty and allegiance if the leader is a kind of leader who apologizes. Same is true for empathy. If you ask people who to rate their leaders on empathy, and then also say how much they like them or how committed they feel, the ones who are rated as highly empathic are the ones, contrary to the kind of the typical business model that if you're a leader, you got to be tough and hard-assed, right? It's not really the case. People like to be listened to, heard, and understood. So are there ways that workplaces can really normalize apologizing and really make reconciliation an explicit goal? This is what we do here. We apologize, we forgive, we work through difficulties, we don't hold on to them and let them fester. At a cultural level, there are some fun things to do, and I've kind of alluded to them by saying, can we make it like an overarching value of our organization? Can we model it? In Silicon Valley, has anybody spent time in like Facebook headquarters or Twitter? So is there something that you noticed about their culture that is really obvious when you walk in the door? Yeah, so Main Street looks like Disney World. Anything on the walls? Yeah, so there's all these posters all over the place that say things like, and this blew my mind as an academic walking in the door for the first time, done is better than perfect. I was like, what? No, done is not better than perfect. But that's a value. There was like fast fail. That's an ideology, innovation. They have an ethos that they visibly produce in an artistic way all over their space in an effort to create a particular culture. There's no reason why workplaces couldn't also exploit that technique, which is again to feature visually ideas or images or words that reflect their values. So maybe your value is we reconcile here, we apologize and forgive each other, right? Being reminded of these little slogans can be really powerful. Maybe your value is that you start every meeting with a 30-second YouTube comedy clip because it makes everyone laugh together. Now, shared laughter is a sign of safety. It lowers blood pressure. It makes everybody feel like they're in a community of peace and trustworthiness. So laughing together is a very powerful way to get everyone onto the same page, to start a conversation, even if it's about or going to be about something difficult or a negotiation, to be more promising. Workplaces that value autonomy and respect and dignity by not really placing so much emphasis on power dynamics or hierarchy tend to be more trusting and tend to foster a sense of belonging. When I gave a workshop on burnout a few weeks ago, what we know about burnout is that it has three main factors. It's about exhaustion, it's about depersonalization, and that is just feeling ostracized and disconnected from everybody, and it's about low efficacy. That is feeling like what you're doing just doesn't matter, right? And one of the things that can really drive all of those three is having no agency, feeling like what I do doesn't matter. I'm not in control of what I do doesn't matter, and thus I feel exhausted by this ridiculous set of demands and unattainable goals that I have. So autonomy as a core value is an important cultural quality. So that said, let's do a quick little personal practice. This is about 9 minutes long. So everybody get comfortable, and we'll just go ahead and do it. See if it works.
To begin this practice, let yourself be in a relaxed and comfortable position. We're going to do the practice of cultivating positive emotion. In this case, loving kindness, which is the desire for someone to be happy, or yourself to be happy. It's not dependent on something, it's not conditional. It's just a natural opening of the heart to someone else or to yourself. So you can check into your body and notice how you're feeling right now, letting whatever is here be here. Now let yourself bring to mind someone whom, the moment you think of them, you feel happy. See if you can bring to mind, it could be a relative, a close friend, someone with not too complicated a relationship, but just a general sense that when you think of them, you feel happy. You can pick a child, or you can always choose a pet, a dog or cat, a creature it's fairly easy to feel love for. So let them come to mind, have a sense of them being in front of you. You can feel them, sense them, see them. And as you imagine them, notice how you're feeling inside. Maybe you feel some warmth, or there's some heat to your face, a smile, a sense of expansiveness. This is the loving kindness. This is this natural feeling that's accessible to all of us at any moment. So now, having this loved one in front of you, begin to wish them well. May you be safe and protected from danger. May you be happy and peaceful. May you be healthy and strong. May you have ease and well-being. And as I say these words, you can use my words or your own words, but have a sense of letting this loving kindness come from you and begin to touch this loved one, reaching out. You might think in images, you might have a sense of color or light. You might just have a feeling. The words may continue to bring on more of this feeling, and I encourage you to say whatever feels meaningful to you. May you be free from stress and anxiety. May you be free from all fear. And so as you're sending out these words and these feelings of loving kindness, also check into yourself and see how you're feeling inside. And now imagine that this loved one turns around and begins to send it back to you. So see if you can receive the loving kindness, take it in. And they're wishing you well. May you be happy, meaning you. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be safe and protected from all danger. May you have joy, well-being. So letting yourself take it in. Now, if you're not feeling anything at this point or before in the meditation, it's not a problem. This is a practice that plants seeds. And if you're feeling something else other than loving kindness, just check into that. What is it I'm feeling? There may be something to learn here. Now, if it's possible, and it's not always easy to do this, but see if you can send loving kindness to yourself. You can imagine it coming down your body from your heart. Or you can just have a sense of it. May I be safe and protected from danger. May I be healthy and strong. May I be happy and peaceful. May I accept myself just as I am. And as you ask yourself the question, what do I need to be happy? See what arises and offer that to yourself. May I have meaningful work, a joyful life, close friends and family. And now checking into yourself and noticing what it is you feel as you do this. And now let yourself bring to mind one person or a group of people that you wish to send the loving kindness to. Imagine them in front of you. Sense them, feel them. May you be happy and peaceful. May you be free from all stress and anxiety and fear, worry, grief. May you have joy and happiness, well-being. And now let this loving kindness expand out, spreading, touching anyone that you want to touch right now. In all directions. People you know, people you don't know. People you have difficulty with. People you love. Just imagine expanding and touching, and each person or animal, whoever is touched by this loving kindness, Each person is changed. You can imagine that. So may everyone everywhere be happy and peaceful and at ease. May we all experience great joy.
Right, so Barbara Fredrickson, a researcher at the University of North Carolina, did a study at a tech company. And at this tech company, she had some employees do 10 weeks of once a week loving kindness meditation, and another group of employees do 10 weeks of a control group activity. And those who had done the loving kindness at the end of 10 weeks had lower stress levels, higher levels of positive emotions. They were benefited by having engaged in this practice. And again, this is just an exercise like going to the gym, but for your emotional and sort of mental life, not for a muscle. But you don't need to think of exercises and learning as that different from exercising to get stronger muscularly. So spending time like that really enables you to touch base with your pro-sociality, with your trust in others. So moving on to another little interpersonal practice, and let me see how I'm doing on time, make sure I don't run out. You know what, I'm gonna ask you to remember this one and do it at home or do it at work tomorrow. Take 5 minutes to sit with someone and for a moment, just make a list of what you have in common and go through that list together. So maybe it begins with you're both human beings and you both have hair and you're both wearing clothes, but then it ends with you both lived in Wichita for a year during your young adult life, or you both have something more profound in common that you didn't know. And this is partly a practice in sort of commonality and connection, and partly a practice in authenticity. Right? Sharing something about your personal life with the people that you work with can be a very powerful way to help them understand how to work with you and how to sort of anticipate your needs and to be more supportive. So this is just a suggestion for something you could do with a colleague that would foster your sense of connection and build your relationship. Another interpersonal practice that is actually it's called the 36 questions, and Art Aaron, who is actually a professor here at Berkeley now, recently joined Berkeley. He developed it as a task to get people to feel like they were good friends in a short amount of time. And so there are 36 of them in a row. And the idea is you sit down with this other person, you have this conversation where you ask each other these 36 questions, and at the end of having this conversation, you feel really close to that person. You feel really connected to that person. You trust them, you think that they're a nice person, and you'd like to get to know them moving forward. So in this practice, you can simply, other than just pointing out your similarities, have a fun conversation with somebody about something non-work related that sort of gets at something about their personality and shares something about your own. It's a way to build closeness and know something fun about the people that you work with. So if you could wake up tomorrow with any one quality, what would it be? The 36 questions on the actual task start sort of more superficial and generic and get much more complex and deep and revealing over the course of each one of them. So at the level of culture, what could we do to foster trust and togetherness at our workplaces? One, it's super important that this doesn't feel like a direct instruction to employees. Okay, all of you who work here, you all have to start doing more work to make it a nicer place for you to work, right? That's not really fair. In fact, for anything to be successful, there has to be bi-directional buy-in, and leaders need to model it. A leader needs to walk in and openly apologize or openly dialogue with employees or their colleagues about personal issues, share what it is that is challenging them, or openly acknowledge the successes of the people who are working in the workplace. So to really acknowledge, notice, and celebrate people's work, perhaps through an expression of gratitude or other form of appreciation, is a way to model this sort of pro-sociality. We talked about empathy. When leaders are more empathic, they are more successful. Again, in reference to the sort of Silicon Valley model, we talked about done is better than perfect, but here are a few of the other ones I remember. Give more than you take. Right? That was one big poster that I saw. Another poster was humble pie, and it had like a graphic of a pie. So there's just these ideas, these sort of terms or depictions that reflected values that as you're walking around your workplace, if they become what you notice and see day in and day out, they have an effect on the ideas and the orientation of that space. Social recognition. So Dan Ariely, who's a professor of business, wrote a book recently about what makes workplaces most successful. And one of his studies was to sort of evaluate the difference between a person being thanked by their boss or being given a $30 bonus, right? And it turns out, what do you think is going to happen? Who worked more subsequent to that kind of reward, the boss or the $30 bonus? Exactly. So the person who was called by their boss at the end of the day and told, hey, you know what, you did a great job today. It really means a lot to us. I'm so grateful that you put all this effort into the work that you did. You know, it makes, you know, we're all delighted. Was more motivated and more committed to their workplace and felt more important, greater sense of agency than the person who got a monetary bonus for doing the work that they did. So highlighting people's successes openly and very quickly is an important part of creating that kind of culture. And then again, normalizing these conversations and perhaps providing some guidance around how to bring up difficult conversations. And there are several experts who actually have programs that they can come and train organizations on how to bring up and address and work through difficult conversations. I wanted to give you an example of a campaign that we collaborated on. It can be really simple. So this is the San Francisco Metropolitan Transportation Association, where they have a workforce that is relatively isolated, right? They're driving vehicles all day. They're not presented with the most kind interactions from the public all the time. They're solving a lot of problems without having a lot of agency or tools. And as an effort to just shift the kind of perspective of their experience, they created this sort of poster campaign where they drew from research studies and findings about gratitude to post these around on buses. Again, not really necessarily targeted at the workers, but targeted at the people who are interacting with the workers. You know what I mean? When you feel grateful for the fact that there's somebody here driving this bus or this train that's taking you where you need to go, which you would otherwise maybe have to walk or suffer through traffic, you're going to have a different orientation. So here are the two that they made. One was about the health of the drivers. One was about just what happens when people are, when they feel like they're appreciated and can share gratitude openly in their organizations. So just for one short time, I want to reflect on togetherness, because my title is Trust and Togetherness, and I really don't have a lot to say about science around togetherness other than that trust is sort of the vehicle to togetherness, right? When we do all of these things that I talked about to build trust and that sense of commonality between people, togetherness is sort of an inherent or an emergent result. What I would like to say about it is that oftentimes people think of togetherness as kind of like something that happens at home with your family, right? And when you go to work, you have to be yourself. You're your own separate person, and you do your job, you bring your briefcase, you leave all the rest of your baggage at home. I think that is a flawed model and one that doesn't serve well-being for yourself or the workplaces that you're in. And instead, to form this kind of collegiality, this warmth between yourself and the people that you work with, we kind of have to back off on the idea that work and life are so separate, that work equals bad and drudging and obligatory and exhausting, and life is where we get to have all the fun. Actually, work and life they're one thing. Happiness doesn't discriminate. Happiness isn't this like force. It's like, oh, at work, no, at home, yes. It doesn't work that way, right? It's up to us to kind of experience our life in a continuous fashion where we're bringing the same skills and the same personhood, the same authenticity, the same bestness, to refer to the theme of this meeting, right? Your best self isn't just to make the workplace happy. It's so that you can be happy, right? Bring who you want to be and yourself at its best to the workplace so that it becomes a best experience in its own regard for you, not because you're trying to achieve or accomplish or satisfy your workplace goals. It's all mixed together. Work and life mean something similar. Just to give you the resources that I could direct you to moving forward, if you want to know more about the research, if you want to understand the ideas with more depth, the Greater Good Science Center publishes a magazine daily. We have 2 to 3 new articles every day about these ideas and the science behind them. It's free, it's easy to access, to share, to use, greatergood.berkeley.edu. We also have a website that is basically like a library of practices. So I played one of them from this website for you today, the loving kindness meditation. If that one was great and you loved it, you can find it again easily and free. It's made available by the Mindful Awareness Research Center at UCLA. But if you wanted to learn more about how to be an effective apologizer, or how to really tap into an experience we call awe, which is coming into contact with something that's sort of provocative and greater than yourself and makes you feel humble and pro-social, then you can find all of these resources here. And then finally, oh, that's it. Any questions? I'll bring the mic around. I think that, yes, absolutely.
I kind of want to know what I could do today or the next time I go back to work to foster, practically speaking, like given everything you said, there was a lot of ideas, and now I'm back to kind of, but nuts and bolts, like what do we do on a daily basis, and how can I influence the management of my unit to do these practices effectively, like what sort of training or concrete steps we could take?
Great question. Concrete steps. One, personally, you could express gratitude more openly and regularly. At the level of management, you could direct them to the Greater Good Science Center website. In terms of your work community and colleagues, you could all together take the Science of Happiness class online for free. If you wanted to make a space that was more amenable to pro-sociality and kindness, you could get some artwork or make your own word cloud of ideas and values that really matter to you. We kind of dismiss the idea that what we look at day in and day out has a profound influence on how we think and how we interact in the world. But I promise you, if you walked into an office that was like fright, anger, hostility, you would feel not so good as you would if you walked into a place that has aesthetically pleasing, calming, relaxing kind of stuff on the walls. And so can you bring some of that to your workplace? That could be pretty easy. I don't know, maybe they wouldn't allow it. Maybe there's a rule against what's up on the walls, but maybe that's a promising idea. I mean, there's tons of infographics about gratitude, about kindness, about cooperation that you could find and post on the wall. Certainly, I think for any organization, any kind of training that has to do with nonviolent communication is really powerful, or again, having difficult conversations, resolving conflicts. It's almost really powerful to start at the place where things are the most challenging. And it's often kind of interpersonal incivility, as Shola was talking about. When you have incivility kind of bred into the culture of an organization, that might be the greatest opportunity to do some work that will feel like it makes a big change. But then the other ideas could be helpful too, and maybe something you could do immediately. Any other questions? Not at all. Just aesthetically pleasing. No, but basically, I'm sorry. The blue colors on the top, just under how to build, represent which practices I chose. So in other words, compassion is highlighted, empathy is highlighted, forgiveness is highlighted. So what you see in these little sort of thumbnail boxes are the practices that relate to those values. So if I only had compassion picked, there would be a smaller subset that is really specific to practicing compassion. So that's another idea. You know, in our workplace, before every staff meeting, we do a 5-minute meditation. We just do, and it's now kind of normal, and it sets a tone, and it conveys a value, and it doesn't take that long, but it makes a big difference. I mean, I don't know, you guys did a 10-minute meditation. That's pretty intense for walking in the room and thinking you're just going to kind of some ordinary talk. How hard was it? I mean, you guys, I didn't look that much. I tried to like indulge in it myself, but I didn't hear, one person left. I don't know if she had somewhere else to go, but you know, one is not that many, right? So, I mean, it's not that hard to just kind of do just a little bit. Hey, let's do this, or hey, let's do a like funny video before we start. Let's just do something to be deliberate about fostering camaraderie and connection and commonality before. I'm gonna let someone else.
Any tips on working with folks who may not have the capacity to consistently regulate their emotions? Like maybe they're dealing with mental illness or just their own wellness?
Yeah, I mean, how can you support other people who are struggling? In many regards, you know, right? Be present. Concern yourself with the fact that they're suffering rather than getting agitated that maybe they're not doing the work that you wanted them to do because of whatever's limiting them. If there's some way that you can, as a group of colleagues, support someone, there's a wonderful researcher who studies compassion in the workplace. Monica Warline wrote a book about it recently and basically has this whole model for how making your workplace into a compassionate workplace involves creating a culture where when one person does suffer adversity, everybody kind of rallies and says, oh, this terrible thing happened to you. We're all going to contribute in a meaningful way to make your life a little bit easier. So it's not a like from day one to day two kind of endeavor, but a gradual building up of, hey, this is a value, this is what we do. And again, it often involves an investment from leadership. So, yeah.
First of all, thank you very much. One of the examples that you gave was this done is better than perfect, and you know, which actually I wanted to ask if you have more data to show on that based on whether or not this is a Western value, like some of the other values that you discussed that, you know, you could question. The thing that came to my mind is that a lot of people want to get, you know, at a workplace, they want to get through their emails really quickly, but what happened is that they don't really read your question very well. So you end up having to exchange 5 emails after that just because they wanted to get their email done. Yeah. Or, you know, your email had 2 parts, you know, or you specifically had said, you know, please don't process it, just answer the question, and then you see later that your order has been processed, and you're like, yeah, that wasn't. So anyway, is it something that is our culture to just get things done with, you know, and are we paying a price for it? And what do you think?
Great question. The done is better than perfect was a poster at Facebook. I think it's very much an entrepreneurial innovation, kind of deliberate kind of impetus to get things kind of built and shipped, as in their language. I do think that in reference to today's culture and our experience, what we're facing, which may kind of feed into that, is an extreme information overload context, right? It's only in the last 15 years that we've all started walking around with computers in our pockets, on our hips, that we've all checked our email. I checked my email at 9:43 last night and had an email from a colleague that was really important. And my response to him was, I don't think I endorse this email happening right now. I'm super guilty because I'm looking at it and replying to it. But I think a lot of what you describe, sort of the half-hearted / superficial responding to correspondence, is probably just a coping strategy for the fact that we do have so many more things on our list of things to do. There was recently an article on something called time stress, which basically showed that people are happier if they spend money on time-saving purchases than people who don't do that. It's a little bit tricky. It's not a finding that I completely adore. I would rather that people weren't so pressed for time than that people accept being completely pressed for time and then decide they have to pay other people to do the work that they don't like doing. I personally feel like it's really important for my children to see me clean the house. I think they need to know that cleaning up after yourself is an important human responsibility rather than I work and my job is so important that I hire somebody else to do this work that perhaps is, less important, right? So it's an interesting question how we're dealing with over information overload. Research-wise, there are studies of something called perfectionism. So I'm going to take the other side of the coin for a minute. Being a perfectionist or a maximizer is actually harmful to your health and well-being. A perfectionist is somebody who's never satisfied with what they end up producing. A maximizer is somebody who never stops looking for the very perfect thing that's possible, is never able to stop and be today happy with what's happening in front of them, kind of in the words of Shola, like how can you just today do what it is that you're aspiring to do and be sort of content with what's in front of you. If you're a maximizer, you're always looking for something else. You're constantly changing the radio dial to find the better song or the better program and never able to just enjoy what's in front of you. So being a perfectionist is something that lots of young people are kind of struggling with these days. I think there's quite a bit of pressure to have so many different activities and GPA above 4 and SAT scores. I don't know, do they still use the SAT? Anyway, you know where I'm going. It can be harmful to have that kind of mindset. And Steve Hinshaw has written a book about perfectionism and young girls in particular and how harmful it is. So I hope my answer is that any extreme is not so good. Being somebody who is so overwhelmed with things to do that you can't do anything thoroughly is not going to be your success point. And being somebody who can't ever finish anything because it's never quite good enough for yourself or anyone else is also going to be something problematic. So I think we're getting on the end of our time together. I want to thank you all for sharing your time with me. And I'm happy to talk more, but I know you guys have other places to go. So thank you.